Hey, in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up this Yelp filters view. This Yelp filters view is interesting because for the first time, we're handling form input in iOS. And unlike HTML, it's actually a little bit complicated. And I think we'll see why in a minute. This is also going to help us illustrate the generic pattern that we use for in iOS for classes to communicate with each other. So my target is to show you something very like a simplified version of this by, let's say, clicking on this filters page, and then let's say I select African cuisine and then search, and that triggers back to this and lists a bunch of that type of restaurant. So seems like a pretty simple example, although it's actually a little bit involved to set up. So first I'm going to come back here, and in this version of this, I actually have a vanilla Yelp implementation that doesn't yet have the filters page. So here I only have this initial screen. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up the basic scaffolding for me to do this work. So I'm going to come to my main storyboard, and I can see that I have just my one view controller, which is embedded inside of a navigation controller. So I'll go ahead and add my filters view controller. So I'll throw in another view controller here, which will have a table view of those filters. So I'll go ahead and put the table view in here, double check it. So it looks good. Just position this at 0, 0. And I'll throw in here a cell, and I'll have a very simple design right now. So for now, I'm just going to have two elements here. A label, which is going to be the category name, and then a switch. So my auto layout constraints for these views are pretty straightforward. In the table view, it's just zeros all the way around. And then for the cell, for this label, I'll make it aligned. Actually, I'll make these both aligned, both this label as well as this switch centered vertically in the container. And then for the label, I'll add a left margin, and for the switch, I'll add a right margin. So that's my basic setup, and this will be backed by a custom class. So I'll just go ahead and create it now. I'll call it a switch cell, and then create outlets for the two elements I have here. So if I go back to my storyboard and click on this cell, so I click on the cell, I say that it's of type switch cell, and then because I want to reuse it later, I also put switch cell here in the reuse identifier. And then I go ahead and create my outlets. So I'll create first the outlet for this label. So this will be my switch label. And then for this control here, I'll have my on switch. All right. Now, in order to kind of connect these two view controllers, I'm going to add in some navigation. So settings pages are most commonly presented in a modal way, although the filters page, as you notice, will also have a navigation controller. So that's actually in its own navigation, even though this filters page, you actually can't navigate to it, it's still common just to embed it inside a navigation controller. So for example, this will say filters. Now, let's say that I want to put my filters on this left-hand side right here. I'm going to search for this control called a UI bar button item. It's just a button that is designed to go inside of these bars here. And I'll call this filters. Then here, for my filter cell, I want to add a couple here to either cancel this or to search. So if I click on this filters button here, then I can say, hey, when you click on this, and I should modally present this navigation controller. Then in this cancel, I need to dismiss that modal presentation. So let's just run this and see what we have so far. So I have my restaurants view, then I open up my filters. It modally presents this sheet, which itself is embedded in navigation. These don't do anything because they're not wired up, and this is an empty table view. So let's create a new view controller for this filters view. Filters view controller. And I'll configure this class to be registered with the filters view controller. And then create my necessary outlets. So I'm going to need one for the table view. And then on the cancel and search, let's go ahead and create actions for these. On cancel button, and then another action for the on search button. So for now, all I want to do in this cancel and search is simply to dismiss the current view controller. So with this, I have the kind of the basic stitching together of my view controller is complete. So I click on filters, I can go and tinker with some filters here, then I either click cancel or search. So as my first mission, what I'd like to do is I'd like to display a set of Yelp categories. Now for convenience, I've prepared an Xcode snippet here that returns a whole bunch of Yelp categories. So this is the thing that's displayed in text. This is this code is what the API expects. So I'm going to create a variable here for my categories, which will say be an array of dictionaries where I have the display name and the code as two types of keys. And then in here, I'll just, in this view to load, normally I would do this in the initializer, but for convenience, I'll just do it here. So categories is equal to, and then these Yelp categories that I have programmed in. So I'll set up my initial table view so that it just displays this list of categories, data source and UI table view delegate. And I'll do my basic setup. So in a table view, I need to first initialize the data source and delegate to be myself. And then I need to implement my two data source methods. So first I need to return however many categories I might have. So I'll return categories.count. And I know that categories will always be populated here, so it's okay to have an implicit optional here. And then grab a cell. So table view.dq, and my cell name was that switch cell, so I'll grab something of type switch cell, index path as switch cell, and I can configure that cell with the name of my category. So cell.switchlabel.text is equal to categories index path.row, and this should be a dictionary, and the name is what I'm interested in here. So name, and I think that should do it. So if I've done this correctly, then I should have basically a bunch of these category names. So I launch filters here, and I see I have a bunch of available Yelp categories to switch between. Now, here's going to be something interesting. So I'm going to toggle this off. I'm going to toggle this off. You see, I'm going to kind of go in every other pattern here, and then, oh, that's strange. I'm noticing that things I haven't reached are already toggled, and if I go back, the pattern is incorrect. And so you've kind of probably already figured out this is due to the cell reuse, right? So this is why it's more complex than HTML forms. HTML forms, they don't change. The form itself, the view itself captures the form input. You can't rely on that in iOS. In iOS, because these things are reused, I have to kind of capture the data myself. So I have to do this in a few steps. So I'll start with just capturing the event of this click itself, right? So this cell, this switch clicking. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to my switch cell, and one way of doing this we've already done before, which is in the storyboard, I could create here. If I were to switch this to be the filter, the switch cell, I could create an action here for the value changed. So action and then on value change. Just for fun, I'm going to do it a different way. This is actually the same thing as what's being done by drawing that line, and I'll just do it in code. So in order, what that looks like in code is on switch dot add target, and I'll say I want this class to be called with this method. So I just choose the name of a method here in a second. So UI control events for this particular event. So there's a bunch of events that could happen. For me, I'm interested in the value change event. And I'd like you to call some method. I can choose the name of the method. So I'll say maybe switch value changed. So I define it here, switch value changed. And I can print something just to prove that I got it. So I said switch value changed. So if I switch on filters and I click on these switches, I can see that I am successfully passing it at least to the switch cell. So the problem is the switch cell, it's just a view, right? And even though it's firing this event, it's the view controller that needs to bookkeep the actual data. So I need to somehow propagate this event back up. And a common way to do this in iOS is to create my own delegate. And so when you're creating a delegate, it's usually important to follow the iOS naming convention. So for example, I'm going to create a new protocol, right, which is the same thing as an interface. A protocol called, and it's always the name of the class that generates the events. So switch cell, and then the word delegate if it happens to be a bunch of events that we're passing back and forth. And so for example, I could say have a function here that says value change. But again, another convention of iOS naming. So if you look at the UI text field delegate, the UI scroll view delegate, they're all the same way. So they start off with actually the name of the thing that's firing the event. So I'm going to take this switch cell, and I'm actually going to have my first parameter be the switch cell itself. And we're going to see why this is important in a second. Now, the second parameter is going to be a named parameter. So did change value. And again, this kind of follows the Objective-C naming conventions, which they like to have it read as a sentence. So the switch cell did change value. It's just their style. So if someone's not interested in the event, I don't think the switch cell should totally break. So in this case, I don't think it's required that this function is implemented. So I'm going to call it optional and say, if you're interested in this event, feel free to register for it. If you're not, then that's okay too. So for optional things, if I look at this error message, so a comma here, and I notice that optionals can only be applied to members of the @obj_c protocol. So I just need to put @obj_c here. So now that I have that, I have this definition of the event that can get fired, and so I need some object to pass it back to. So I create a delegate here that's of type switch cell delegate, and it's optional. So this delegate may or may not exist. Now, in this switch value changed, I'm going to say, I'd like to say something like, if delegate is not equal to nil, then delegate dot switch cell self did change value, and then it's just the on switch state. So you notice this question mark right here. What this means, so this switch cell, because it's optional, it may or may not exist, right? This switch cell function. So I'm going to put a question mark here that says, if this delegate implements this switch cell, then go ahead and call it. Otherwise, actually don't do anything for this line. So another way I could do this is I can eliminate the if I change this to a question mark. So this is the equivalent concept, right? So if I put a question mark here, then it says if the delegate is non-nil, then call the switch cell if the delegate happens to implement the switch cell. So we kind of have two question marks here that have slightly different meanings. So now, if I go back to my filters view controller, I can, in the self or row index path, set myself to be the delegate. So that says, hey, as the filters view controller, I'm interested in the cell delegate. So I have to declare myself as an implementer of that. And I'm going to run this. This isn't going to work yet because I haven't implemented the switch cell delegate, but I just wanted to demonstrate that if I do this, it's not going to crash, even though I've not implemented this. So the question mark is correctly protecting us from that. So now I'm going to implement the actual delegate method. And this is where it becomes clear why in iOS the convention is to pass back the object that fired the event. It's because I don't know which cell got tapped, right? So I can find out the index path from the table view. Table view dot index path for cell, and I pass back this switch cell. And I can store this value, but for now, let me just print this and just confirm that I got here. So filters view controller got the switch event. So if I click on filters, then I can see here that this is propagating correctly. So what we've done here, just to kind of review, is we, in our custom view, defined a family of events. In this case, only one event that can be fired when we tap inside the switch cell. Then in the filters view controller, I subscribed, or I set myself to be the delegate of that cell, and then I implemented the delegate method. So now what I need to do is I need to store this information, right? I need to do something with it. So I'm going to create another dictionary here. So var switch states. And I'm going to have this be a dictionary keyed by the row, and then this will just be a bool. So this switch state, so let me just initialize it to an empty one of these, right? So this is going to be an empty dictionary that's of type keyed by int and has the value of bool. So inside of my switch cell, if this is switched, then I just need to update this, right? So switch states, and then at the index path dot row is equal to this value. So I've stored it, and the thing is I need to do the opposite now. I need to set it. So I want to do something like cell.onSwitch.on is equal to some Boolean, right? So because this is a dictionary, this on state can either be, if this is non-nil, something. So like, for example, if switch states index path.row is not equal to nil, then this cell is equal to this value here. Otherwise, I set it to some kind of default state. So this thing is equal to, say, false by default. Now, there's a shorthand syntax for this exact thing. So cell.onSwitch.on is equal to, and it's this value. So this says set it equal to this if it exists, otherwise set it equal to false. And this is a shorthand of the ternary operator. I forget what this operator is called. But when you have this as the double question mark, then I think it's, shoot, I forget. So if I delete this, then this is kind of the shorthand syntax for that if statement. So if I run this filters thing, so I do the on, off, and then I see that luckily now all of these are off, right? Because that's the default state that I set. And if I scroll back, I can see that my states are persistent. So I'm almost done. This is how you handle, this is the basic formula for handling form input in iOS, right? Especially when you have this quantity of cells. You could have, if this was just like, say, username and password, you could have just avoided cell reuse, right? And that would have dodged this issue. But it's often the case where you do have a large number, like let's say that you do find friends and you have add friend right here, then you will have a lot of, rows, and you can't have that statically. You have to use cell reuse. So the final thing I want to show you is the same exact pattern, right? Except in this case, it's linking a view controller with a view controller, not a view controller and a view. Right? So this is how you pass back data from one view controller to another. So specifically, when I tap search, I want this to trigger back to the original view controller. So first, let me just wire the basics of that up. Just like with the view, it's the same pattern. I'm going to create another protocol. And I'm going to use the same naming convention that I did before. So it's the class name plus the word delegate. And then I write, just as before, I need to write the thing that fires the event. So filters view controller is what is firing the event. And then I can pass back whatever parameter that I want, right? So in this case, I'll say did update filters as the named parameter. So filters is the local parameter name. And this will just be a dictionary keyed by string that contains something. And again, this is going to be optional, right? So if someone wants to implement that, then that's great. Otherwise, it's not strictly required. So just as before, I'm going to have a delegate, weak var delegate of type filters view controller delegate, and this is optional. So inside of the search method, so on the search button method, in addition to dismissing the view controller, if the delegate does exist, then I want to call the filters view controller method and pass back myself here, and then we'll figure something else, figure something to pass back here for the filter. So I'm going to just create a filter right now, which is an instance of string any object. All right, so this data structure filters, this is arbitrary. It's just because in this example, you might have filters keyed by the price, the looks like the sort, whether it's has a deal or not, or whatever categories there are, right? So this is just some arbitrary pattern that I'm choosing right now, which is to say, in this filters, let's just organize it as a dictionary. And in this case, I'm going to have pass back a key called categories with an array of categories. Right, so this is me calling the delegate event. So I've declared the delegate up here, and then I've called the delegate down here. Now, in the business view controller, which is the originating thing, I need to set myself to be the delegate. So here in this prepare for segue method, this is the method that gets called right before I do a transition, right? So right as I click filters and right before that view shows, I have an opportunity to set myself to be the delegate. So I'm going to grab that pointer to the destination view controller. So this will be the, not the filters view, but the navigation controller, because that's the root view, equal to segue.destination view controller as UI navigation controller. And I just happen to know that the first view controller of the navigation controller is going to be my filters view controller. So filters view controller is equal to navigation controller dot top view controller, and this is going to be typed as the filters view controller. And now finally I can set myself to be a delegate of that filters view controller. Of course, if I do that, then I want to declare myself to be a delegate of the filters view controller. And then implement that one filters method. Okay, so I'm going to implement this filters view controller here. And what I'd like to do is here I'd like to re-trigger this data call. So if I go back to my business class, I can see that I can search with a particular term and pass in some stuff here. So this allows me to pass in some term. Let me just search for restaurants for right now. And then I don't have the sort mode right here, so I'm just going to pass in nil. I'm going to see if I can pass back a category for my filters, and I'm not going to worry about deals right now. So when this thing finishes, then it's going to return to me ultimately new businesses that matches that filter with an error here. And so just as I did before, I can set my businesses equal to the businesses here returned by the query, and then reload my table view. So the key is I need to somehow get this category, right? And so what I said before is, this is just something that we're inventing right now. I want to say, well, these categories, let's just say that my filters, I'm going to expect that there is a key called categories, where I'm hoping that whoever put something in there put it as an array of strings. And if they did that, then I'll go ahead and pass that into my business query and take this, fill out this term. So my goal is in the filters view controller, I just need to somehow generate this filters category. So I'm going to go back to filters view controller, And in the on search button method here, I need to somehow prepare this filters array, right? So I'm going to iterate through my switch states. So this is going to be the row, and this value is whether or not this switch is selected. So this is the Swift kind of iterator to take me through a dictionary. So it's gonna walk me through all the keys and then all the values. And so if this switch is selected, then I want to add that filter to an array of categories. So I'm going to create some categories here, some selected categories here. I'll just allocate it as a empty array of strings. And I'll say that if I'm selected here, then in my selected categories, I want to add to this list. And so this is going to come from my categories list for my instance variable. And I'm going to index it by the row that's been selected. And then that's giving me, again, another dictionary, which is either name or code. So I'll grab code out of it here. And then append my categories. So at this point, I should have some selected categories. Now, if these selected categories actually have something in them, then for my filters, I'm going to put into my categories these selected categories. So if I run this now, and I click on this filter, so if I click on this cuisine and I click search, then I can see that it's filtered down to African restaurants. And if I look at filters again and maybe click on this one, as well as clicking on, say, American traditional, then click search, and I see that it's a mix of those two categories. And I can see from this category filter that it has correctly added those two categories in. So that's basically the same pattern explored twice. One, linking a custom view, creating a custom view event with a view controller, and another, having a view controller itself fire an event and pass it back to another view controller. So that's it for this video.